Okay, everyone, thanks for coming to the monthly developer call. So we're going to go over the changes and what's coming in the 0.33 release of Hummingbot. And we're also going to go through a new feature that that we have releasing in 0.33 called Gateway API. And this is going to be a big change for Hummingbot because for the first time, we're really optimizing how Hummingbot connects to different protocols in addition to exchanges. So we've been around for a year and a half, and Hummingbot so far has really focused on connecting to protocols, or I'm sorry, to exchanges. But now, now that with the rise of Uniswap, Curve, and Balancer, we're also seeing a lot of new protocols get up and running. And so Hummingbot is, we want to connect to protocols the same way we connect exchanges. So now we have a new module in 0.33 called Gateway API that's going to help Hummingbot connect to new protocols. And for the first protocols we're adding to this, we're featuring Balancer, which is an Ethereum protocol that we're partnering with in order to help them get more liquidity for the protocol. So, so during this, first we'll go over the changes in 0.33, and then we'll go to a bit of a deeper dive into how Gateway API works. So first in 0.33, first it's going to be delayed until next Monday. So originally we're going to release this Monday, but because of some of the more testing we're doing with Gateway API and other aspects that are being released here, we're delaying the release until next Monday, November 9th. And so that gives us one more week to do testing. And then for the next release, we're going to shorten that to 3 weeks. So to kind of get back on schedule and to continue to release at the end of November for the 0.34 release. So for 0.33, the big changes are, number one, we're releasing a connector for OKX. We're also releasing a connector for Binance Futures, which is the first time we're supporting a derivative exchange with Hummingbot. There's also a strategy along with the Binance Futures connector that focuses on market making for perpetual swaps. So please try that. Note that the Binance Futures connector and the strategy associated with it is still in beta. We just released it, and we're still kind of ironing out the kinks in that strategy. So it's really for testing purposes for the community. In addition, in 0.33, we also have a number of changes that are aimed at making the user experience better for users. For example, when you load the Hummingbot client, you'll see that we've improved the HUD. So the top nav bar now contains information on which strategy you're running and the strategy file that you're using. Also, the bottom nav bar now has information on how many trades you've done, what the performance you've had, as well as information on what kind of resources your machine is using, like CPU, memory, and so forth. And we hope that these changes will help the user just kind of get more information without having to type status or history or other things like that. In addition, there are some commands like status, which we've made persistent. So if you run status in the new version, you'll see that it actually updates automatically on the fly. So so that if you just want to monitor how the market's behaving, you can use that command to see kind of how the market's changing over time without having to retype that into the client. So I think there's a lot of these changes in 0.33, but the one I want to focus on today is with respect to Gateway API. So I'm going to share my screen now and go through a presentation that one of our engineers, Dune, who's also on the line, can put together. So I'll go with the presentation, and Dune, if you want to chime in, please go ahead. Okay, so present this. Okay. Actually, am I sharing my the screen with a presentation view, or is it sharing the actual presentation itself.
I'm seeing like a both side, one on the larger, and
Okay.
you have also to see
Yep.
the navigation mode.
Got it. Yeah, let me just get out of this. Okay, I'll just do it this way since there aren't that many slides. Yeah, so gateway. So we're calling this new module in Hummingbot Gateway or Gateway API, and it's basically in a local server that runs basic JavaScript modules like Node and Express. And the idea is that it's a light API server that Hummingbot can connect to, and it allows Hummingbot to interact more seamlessly with JavaScript-based protocols and other modules. So we built this because we noticed that a lot of the blockchain protocols are optimized for JavaScript. So they may kind of like run some type of JavaScript-based language, or a lot of times they expose some type of like JavaScript-based SDK or API outside, externally. And a lot of these SDKs are really core to interacting with a protocol. So before we had this, it would have been, we would have had to build a lot of things in Python and rewrite a lot of these SDKs in order to make Hummingbot work with protocols. But because we're using this Gateway API kind of as a translation layer, that allows Hummingbot to kind of natively use JavaScript-based modules like NPM modules or SDKs that protocols have published to help developers interact with them more seamlessly. And so essentially it's just a layer that has those kind of like those APIs, and then Hummingbot will basically use that in order to send transactions that make use of those JavaScript-based modules. So things like pricing, looking at balances, and executing trades. And the benefits is that it's still going to be open source and part of Hummingbot. So it means that people can also anyone can add to it. In addition, it's it's going to take advantage of these libraries out there published by protocols instead of us reinventing the wheel. And finally, it allows us to connect to protocols where they don't have an API. So for example, a lot of blockchain protocols, it's you're interacting directly with the blockchain. And so, you don't have kind of it's a different kind of like method of operation because you don't have the confirmation of calling an API endpoint and getting a response immediately. Sometimes you have to kind of wait, check the blockchain to see what happened, and then make decisions afterwards. And so overall, we think that this Gateway API kind of module is a better framework for interacting with protocols than using kind of the native Hummingbot client directly. So here's how it works from an architectural standpoint. Essentially, it's a separate Docker container that you would install in addition to Hummingbot. There's a kind of a setup process that helps you securely connect Hummingbot to Gateway API. And then the Gateway API has different libraries that interact with various protocols. So for Ethereum, there's a native kind of like Ethereum connector library, as well as an add-on specifically for the balancer protocol. And then finally, for Terra, it's a direct kind of connector to Terra. And in the future, we anticipate that other protocols we can either support, or other protocols can also contribute their connectors into this framework. In addition, because it's a single container and it's kind of separate from the Hummingbot instance, we think that in the future, we can also take advantage of the fact that multiple Hummingbot instances can connect to the same Gateway API kind of container. Initially, we're not really making use of this, but in the future, we could envision users who are building some type of reporting functionality or some type of performance attribution functionality that allows multiple Hummingbot instances to send data to it, and it can give like a more holistic perspective of what's going on with the user's different instances. So in terms of how it works, it's a Docker image. There's a size around 300 megabytes. And when you run the normal Hummingbot Docker installation script, there'll be an optional installation option that allows you to install it. And essentially, it's a standalone web app. So it can also be used independently without Hummingbot through API calls. However, because of the need for security, we are kind of building in kind of like checks to make sure that the Hummingbot client has to kind of certify itself, and only you need that certification file in order to access the Gateway API. And so I think it can be used as a standalone, but I would say we have the default configuration is really aimed at allowing access from Hummingbot in a secure way. So the way this works from a security perspective is that it is a separate kind of like server that you're launching locally on the same machine where you're running the Hummingbot instance, and that new server is mapped to a port, about 5,000 or 5,001, and then the Hummingbot client is going to generate certificates, and then the Gateway API will check to see if those certificates are valid before operation. And so that's how it kind of like maintains security, so that no other external actors can access Gateway API except from the Hummingbot client. In addition, the Gateway API doesn't store, it's intended not to store any sensitive information. So it's just like an API layer, and it accepts the private key used to sign messages that's used to do it. And we did it that way because we wanted to take advantage of the fact that Hummingbot already has an interface for storing secrets. So when you store your private key with Hummingbot, it's encrypted with your Hummingbot password and stored locally. And so we wanted to use that same framework and not store that private key in another insecure location. So the way that Hummingbot works is that the private key is still stored within Hummingbot, protected by the same kind of encryption that's normally used. And whenever it uses Gateway API, it will pass the private key, like to Gateway, and then Gateway will then use it to sign transactions and then execute those transactions. So that's why the security of kind of like how Hummingbot interacts with Gateway is a very important aspect, and we spend a lot of time making that kind of secure, and also explaining how users should interact with it in the documentation. So this is why if you just kind of run Gateway API by itself and you try to connect to it with your browser or something like or curl through command line, you're going to get a message like this, which indicates that there's a unique SSL certificate. So essentially, we are kind of using SSL, but it's SSL from a local perspective. So Hummingbot is, it still has to certify itself in order to interact with Gateway API, even though it's on the same instance. So internally, this shows you can also use Postman in order to kind of just interact with Gateway API directly. I think we'll probably publish some documentation when we actually release this, showing how users can also test just the Gateway API aspect by itself, and if they don't want to kind of use Hummingbot. But this part's really aimed at developers. So if you wanted to, because we're doing this because we want developers to be able to add their own extensions onto this. And so if there's a protocol out there that maybe has a decentralized exchange or an AMM that kind of wants to be plugged in Hummingbot, Gateway API is basically how they would do that. So in this release 0.33, we're releasing support for Bouncer, which is our first kind of like the first integration that we're going to build into Gateway API. In 0.34, we're also working on a similar kind of like partnership for Terra, where Terra is also going to be in Gateway API. And finally, we also plan to migrate the Cello connector over to Gateway API in the future. Currently, Cello is kind of built into the Hummingbot client. However, because we think that once we use Gateway API, we can use more native parts of the Cello stack like contract kit or other things like that, we think we'll do that eventually. And of course, Uniswap, Curve, and other Ethereum protocols, I think, are the first candidates to use Gateway API for in the next few releases. And of course, in the future, as I mentioned earlier, we think it's feasible to use Gateway API as sort of like a collector for data being sent from multiple Hummingbot instances, which would allow it to, create a front end, do reporting, and other things like that to make lives easier for people who are running Hummingbot. And so if that would happen down the road, this is kind of how it would work typically, where it would kind of like also use kind of Docker to spin up other kind of modules that Hummingbot can send information to. So one could be a connector for various protocols, but another could be for reporting or monitoring as well. So yeah, so that's about it. And I hope that was helpful in just kind of like showing how this new module at Hummingbot works. And what we're going to do is this is also why we're taking a bit longer to ship 0.33, because we are going to take a little more time to get this right. So the 0.33 release will be out in about 1 week, in November 9th. But then afterwards, the 0.34 release should be 3 weeks after that. So that's it for today. I think we had a bit of a time mix-up for this developer call, given that it was daylight savings time in the US yesterday. So we'll try to do a little more marketing and a little more notification for the community for the next call, which should be in about 3 weeks, or I'm sorry, in 4 weeks. But this call, we will publish this on YouTube. And so if anyone has questions about how Gateway API works or anything in this,